If you're a real estate agent who takes probate listings or plans on taking probate listings, there are some really important principles and concepts that you need to understand. And my goal is to help you be up to speed on those principles and concepts so that in the event that you encounter them, you know exactly what to do. So if you follow my channel, you may have seen a couple of my videos addressing probate issues. One talks about the difference between tenancy in common and joint tenancy and what you need to do if you're taking a probate listing to determine how you move, depending on whether the owners held title as joint tenants or tenants in common. I have another couple videos that talk about transfer on death deeds and how you need to move with those when you're dealing with a probate situation. Today, I want to talk to you about a concept that is unique to Georgia. I don't believe any of the other 49 states recognize this principle, and it is called years support. My name is Sharon Smoot. I'm a realtor and a residential real estate closing attorney, and I want to get right into today's topic, years support. So, what exactly is years support? Year support allows for a surviving spouse and or the decedent's minor children to take from the estate prior to creditors, beneficiaries, and heirs. Even if there's a will, if a petition for year support is granted, it trumps whatever is in the will as it pertains to the property that is set aside for the surviving spouse and the minor children as years support. Now, the one thing that I want to address before I go any further is years support, the term years support. It does not mean that it is only good for a year. Once the property has been set aside for the financial benefit of the surviving spouse and the minor children, it's a done deal. Now, can the petition or the order be modified? Yes. We're not going to get into all of that today. That is way beyond the time I have for this video. And I don't want to get too deep into the legalese because as a real estate agent, you're not supposed to be giving out legal advice. So I don't want you to fall into that trap of going further than you're supposed to go. So if you're on a listing appointment and you encounter someone who says that they acquired title via year support, the first thing that you're going to do is ask to see the document whereby they acquired that title. So, what happens when the probate court sets aside property? And in this instance, I'm talking specifically about real property. It could be a bank account, it could be a vehicle, it could be other things. But in this scenario, we're talking about real estate. When the probate court sets aside real estate for the benefit of the surviving spouse and or minor children, a certificate or an affidavit is going to be filed in the real estate records where the property is located, and that is the conveyance to the surviving spouse and or the minor children. That's how the world knows that this property has been conveyed to them for years support. That's principle number one that you need to understand. And once that property is set aside for them, that's it, they own it. Now, if a property is set aside as year support for the surviving spouse has the authority to sell it. If that property is set aside for the surviving spouse and the minor children, and those children are still minors, the property cannot be sold without first obtaining court approval. And we're going to get back to that in a moment. If the property has been set aside as year support for the surviving spouse and minor children, but those minor children are no longer minors, the property can be sold without first obtaining court approval. However, all of those children who are now adults but were minors at the time that the grant of year support was made must agree and join with the surviving spouse to sell the property. That means that they all must sign the listing agreement and they all must sign the purchase and sale agreement. So let's go back to the situation where the order of year support has been granted to the surviving spouse and the minor children, and those children are still minors. This is going to require court approval, like I mentioned a moment ago, and that can take some time. So if you're talking to the surviving spouse and they say that they want to get that house sold within the net or listed and sold within the next 60 to 90 days, it could potentially take longer than that. And so my advice to you is to make sure that they know that they must get court approval and to direct them back to the probate attorney who assisted them with obtaining the year support order in the first place. Now, on the off chance that they represented themselves, that's when you need to refer to your list of contacts, and you should have several probate attorneys in your list of contacts and refer them to those probate attorneys. Remember, if you're making referrals to probate attorneys, chances are when they need someone to help one of their clients sell a property, they're going to think of you first. So refer them to several probate attorneys, and your broker might tell you something different, but I believe in making a referral to several entities. In this case, we're talking about probate attorneys. Other times you might be referring them to roofers or home inspectors or whatever, but refer to more than one. And the reason that I say that is that you want them to have a choice. You want them to be able to interview these attorneys, to have consultations with these attorneys, and to make a decision. And that way, if things go left, and hopefully they won't, but on the off chance that things go left, they can't circle back to you and say, oh, well, you told me to use this particular probate attorney. If you give them the option and you make sure they understand you are just making a referral, you are not necessarily making an endorsement, then you're kind of shielding yourself and your broker from any blowback in the event that they're dissatisfied with the services that that particular probate attorney provided to them, the probate attorney that they selected from the three that you recommended. And another caveat to that is give them the three and then also encourage them to do their own research as well. And check out who those three are. Maybe they'll find somebody else as they're doing their research. Just make sure that they understand it's a referral, not an endorsement or recommendation. Now, the other thing that I want to touch on before I wrap this video up is that you may have a situation where you're sitting down with someone who wants to sell a piece of property and the will has not been probated yet. There are certain instances where a year's support can come into play and the will doesn't need to be probated. If Bob and Mary have been married for 50 or 60 years, all the kids are deceased, and or maybe they didn't have any kids. Let's say they didn't have any kids, and Mary doesn't want to deal with having the will probated. Your support might be a good option for her. So you can tell her that your support could be an option for her and then make that referral. You know, she might ask you, do I have to probate this will? I really don't want to go to the time and expense of probating the will. There are no other heirs. It's just me. There are no creditors. It's just me. And even if there are creditors, if Bob had some unsecured creditors, but that's when you might tell her there's this thing called year support that might be a good option for you. I can't give you any legal advice, but I can refer you to several probate attorneys and you can choose who you want to hire. Maybe you decide that you don't want to hire any of them. You find somebody else that you like. but this particular vehicle may be a great way for you to dispense with having to go through an extended probate situation. Now, I mentioned earlier that I have a couple of other probate related videos. I'm going to set the links for those in the description of this video, and they'll also appear somewhere here on the screen at the end of the video. You can also download my probate listings checklist. The link for that is in the description as well.